Hi everyone, and thank you for being here for our Inspire Student session. Before introducing our panelists and today's session, I will let the floor to Alma, who's the president of CAS, to tell us a bit more about the Geneva Forum on East Asia and the CAS.
Everyone, thanks for joining today from different time zones or different places, and welcome to the Inspire Student Roundtable today. It is actually one of the monthly series organized by the Alumni Office of the Graduate Institute. And this month, the topic is a little bit different because this session is the time of this session for between the week-long Geneva Forum on East Asia. So we kind of give a regional focus on East Asia to this special Inspire Student Roundtable. So today we're really happy to have 4 alumni with us that are based in East Asia countries. So if you also want to know more about the Geneva Forum on East Asia, we will send a link in the chat box in a minute, and you're welcome to check out our program, and there will be more interesting topics and sessions in the following few days. Thanks.
Thank you, Alma. So, hi everyone, my name is Lucille. I'm a second-year MDev student and I work in the alumni office with Karine Le and Clémentine Pierrefeu. So thanks to all of you for tuning in. And so as you've already seen, I've hit the record button so that this roundtable is available for those who couldn't join us and also for later if you want to rewatch it. Please use the Q&A option to ask your questions, not the chat, during the panel or at the end of the panel. You can ask directly to one panelist or ask a general question. And lastly, you may ask your questions in English or French. And just to give you a bit of a background on Inspire Students, they're monthly thematic roundtables organized by the Alumni Office, and they're aimed at connecting current students and alumni of the Institute around shared interests and to share experiences. So this series is in collaboration with the Career Services, which you know very well, namely Aline and Tiffany, who are here with us today, and Aline will be moderating the session. And this time we're also collaborating with CAS as part of the Geneva Forum in East Asia, as we've already said. So I will briefly introduce all the panelists, and then I will leave the floor to the moderation of the event. So today we have Yi-King Ho with us, who's been working as an international and relief officer at the Hong Kong Red Cross for almost a year. After obtaining her MIA at the Institute in 2019, she interned at the OECD before starting a job at Impact Initiatives. She has expertise in project management, particularly in assessment, as well as monitoring and evaluation, while working with international organizations across the UN, humanitarian, and development sector. Then we have Monica Ma with us, who is a Senior Development Coordinator for the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. After graduating with an MDev in 2018, she interned at CARE in Geneva and then worked in the research sector back in the US. And with us, we have Tiara Lin, who's a political affairs officer at the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat in Seoul. She has worked as a senior reporter at the Global Times, a leading English language newspaper based in Beijing. And she was also a contributor at Shanghai Daily and Shenzhen Daily. Lin has a master's degree in international journalism from Hong Kong Baptist University and a master's degree in humanitarian action at CERA, a joint center for the University of Geneva and the Graduate Institute. And finally, we have Amado Trejo, who is the co-founder and COO of Free Entrepreneurs, a Shanghai-based platform focused on developing networks for open innovation projects in different startup ecosystems. Amado has also specialized in higher education outreach between Asia and Latin America, acting as the Asia Board Director of the Autonomous University of Nuevo León in Mexico. And he has advised key policymakers and leaders in the private sector in both countries about trends, opportunities, and best practices in business, education, innovation, and tourism. So I'll leave now the floor to Aline to start the session and ask the questions to our panel. And please enjoy, and don't hesitate to ask questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, hello again to all of you. I'm very pleased to moderate this roundtable again today. The first question that I would have is for all of you. And it would be, how is it like to pursue an international career in East Asia? So please feel free to comment on the job market in your country, where you're based at least, and the sector you're working at, if necessary. So Yingqing, would you like to start?
Thank you, Aline. Hope everyone can hear me well. So first of all, very important, good afternoon to everyone here who is joining from Geneva or Europe, or good afternoon to my fellows here who are currently based in Asia, like I do. So going back to your question, I would answer it from my perspective as a local in Hong Kong who landed a relatively, I would say, international job back in my hometown, Hong Kong, not long ago. So I would say it is in fact as challenging as pursuing an international career in any other regions based on my personal experience. So I joined the humanitarian sector after my graduation around 2 years ago. And when I was deciding to leave my previous job in the Middle East, it was my biggest wish that I could continue to develop my international profile as a humanitarian or to obtain related work experience in the development sector. So actually that time when I was thinking about to return to Hong Kong, it was among the options I have, which I actively consider due to personal reasons. But indeed, that time I was actually quite worried about coming back to this city would potentially harm my profile as a humanitarian. So I know this might sound a bit like discouraging, but somehow that could be my reality. Because well, I know many of you here, if you know Hong Kong, this small city quite well for quite some time already, it is mainly because of its international financial hub image. So unsurprisingly, if you want to work as an expat in Hong Kong, for sure you can find interesting job opportunities in the financial sector. So for the field of international affairs, there are relevant positions at the consulates based in Hong Kong. But if you're specifically looking for jobs in the NGO sector like I did, so you will find opportunities. They are mainly related to fundraising, or others that are in fact very localized job opportunities, which often come with the requirements of you must have a social work background in order to apply to it. So I would say I was very lucky enough to find my current position at the Hong Kong Red Cross, which is like also well recognized in the humanitarian sector. But yeah, based on my personal experience, I would conclude that interesting international opportunities do exist in East Asia, in Hong Kong, but actually they are quite limited. And on top of that, your language skills and cultural background might really matter in it. So I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Yingqing. Monica, I would have the same question for you. How is it like to pursue an international career in East Asia?
Hey everyone, yeah, thank you so much, Aline, for the question. First of all, thank you to CAS and the Graduate Institute alumni for having me. In answer to the question, I would say that it is, I think, both an exciting and also a challenging time right now to try and enter the sector in China. So much like Yiking, I started working on China very recently. I was actually studying and working with a regional focus in the Middle East before. But when I was in DC, I think that there was a real sense that a lot of the focus was shifting towards East Asia. And as a Chinese American myself, I really felt that I was drawn to the issues that was developing. I felt that I had something to contribute, and I also really wanted to return to China as well. This is all in 2020, in the summer of 2020, and I think at that time there was still a lot of hope and expectation for a lot of people that perhaps the situation would sort of normalize after the Trump administration, that we would return to normal, that maybe bilateral tensions between the US and China would de-escalate somehow. I think we all see now that that's not necessarily true, even though some of the rhetoric has changed, a lot of the policies have remained in place. So I think for what this means in terms of working in the research and policymaking space, you know, on one hand, there's a lot of new opportunities because I think governments around the world are really clamoring for more experts on China, people with maybe the language skills, the background, or maybe technical skills like cybersecurity, who can work on these issues. You know, I work with a lot of multinational corporations in the private sector for my job, and there is a real interest, strong interest, to constantly learn more about what is happening with US-China relations. On the other hand, there is, of course, a lot of challenges, new challenges. Of course, access is much more restricted now than it was even just a few years ago. For example, I think, you know, one of the really unfortunate consequences of what is happening is that a lot of the international exchange programs have had to then move to the virtual setting. You know, a lot of US exchange programs in China are looking to move to other countries. This has happened with the Carnegie Tsinghua Center's Young Ambassador Program as well, our internship program, where I think my colleagues have done a really fantastic job of creating a new virtual program where, you know, we're bringing experts virtually to students. But I do think that there is no replacement for having that type of experience on the ground, people-to-people exchanges, the language learning that you get inside China. So I think it is a bit of a mixed bag right now, but I would say that we're kind of getting the lesson that everybody is learning during COVID, is that there is a real need to be flexible and adaptive. Even though some opportunities might be going, I think there will be a lot of new opportunities to come because of what is happening. And so I think my advice would be to, you know, continue on this path, definitely, if you're very passionate about it, and to take the opportunities as they come. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Monica. Tiara, same question to you. How is it like for you? We cannot hear you. Yes, it should work. Yes, thank you.
Great. Hi, I'm Tiara Lin. I was born in China. I'm now working for an IL based in South Korea. What has driven my decision to go back to East Asia? Can I say 7-Eleven? Because I really miss 7-Eleven, such an awesome 24/7 convenience store. But that's not true. I think for many students, for many Asian students who go all the way to study in Geneva, going back to Asia after graduation might not be their plan A. You know, they might want to stay in Geneva, they want to stay in Europe or go to US, go to Canada. You know, going back to Asia, well, wasn't really my plan A. But it wasn't a bad choice. Like they said, Asia is booming, the job market is booming. More people means more connection. You know, connection means everything in Asia. More connection means more opportunity. Actually, I think it might be easier for Asian people to find a international career in East Asia. But I want to talk about a mindset that my former Geneva roommate told me is sometimes you need to be delusional. Being delusional is not always a wrong thing. Some delusion are useful. I call it useful delusion. For example, my useful delusion is I believe I'm always in the right place. Like people who work in the IO field, you always get relocated from city to city, from country to country, from mission to mission. You don't know where you're going next. So if you believe you are always in the right place, you would have a more meaningful life. Like, for example, I'm now in South Korea. I don't even speak Korean, but I believe I'm in the right place. When I was at Geneva, I believe I was in the right place. That doesn't necessarily make me a very successful person, but it makes me a very happy person. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiara, to share this insight and mindset. This is very useful. Thank you very much. Amado, same question. How is it like for you?
Well, basically, I'm from Mexico, and the main idea to coming to China, I'm based in Shanghai since 2008. In the institute in Geneva, at the same time I was doing my master's, I was working for the Mexican mission to the WTO in the service sector. And we had, well, a lot of interesting issues with China to negotiate in the service sector. And many people at that time in 2008, 2006, 2008, they were considering China as angel or devil for Latin America. There is a very interesting policy paper wrote in at that time in the OECD with that topic. And at the end of the day, I was specializing more and more my studies in this bilateral relation in the service sector and trade, commerce, and I was involved in a lot of negotiations in Geneva, in the WTO, on the matter. And then I said, well, actually, it's not either one or the other. It's just represent a different market and a big opportunity that not many people know or is familiar with, at least. So that's why I decided to come to China and to figure out for myself what was it, you know. And well, I never left since 2008. And reality is that it's true, many things of what you said in the job market at the moment is not necessarily very open as it used to be for people doing cross-border, I will say cross-border activities or international activities, but it's mainly cross-border or regional due to the COVID restrictions, and not only in China, but in also other countries in the region. But one of the things that I learned here is that at least in China, you have to, and it's mainly in most East Asian countries, you have to adapt to the pace because competition is really hard. People work really, really hard in general. And at the end of the day, well, you have to keep up with the expectations that you have for yourself, not towards others, but with yourself. And there is no other region at the moment that I will see that will have the opportunities for growth for young professionals and even middle career or all levels than East Asia region. I remember when I was, I mean, I'm 39 years old already, but when I decided to go in exchange program for the first time to Europe in 2001, there was a lot of excitement for, I was at Sciences Po for 1 year, exchange student at the university, and my goal was to get to know the European Union integration. That was what we were discussing, the euro and the launching of the euro and the common era and so on and so forth. So then I stayed in Europe from 2001 until 2008. So it was great. After, well, the crisis, right? Economic crisis. And I left, I think, at the right time to being in Asia and in China with a big boom, and we never felt the crisis here. So on the contrary, but if you ask me now, with all the things that are going on in the economic situation in China or in East Asia, well, who knows? Maybe we will have a crisis very soon. I'm not sure. I'm not an economist, but I can see the tea leaves, and times will be tougher in the next, well, in this year, it's getting tougher, and next year will be a bit tough. But at the end of the day, there is still growth, no? And we will not grow like 10% as it used to be. But yeah, there's still a lot of opportunities, and we need to assess them. And it's not easy. It's not easy as it used to be. So we need to be smart about it. But we will discuss further that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amadou, for your insight. Very, very informative as well. Now I have a question for Yiking. Given your international experience, what do you think are the differences and similarities working for humanitarian and development sectors in different regions? for instance, in a European context and East Asian context?
Sure. Thanks, Aline, again. So I would say I really like this question. I find it very thought-provoking, and I would say I constantly think about it since my return to Hong Kong, and also think it's very important for those like being a humanitarian who work across regions. So I think I would go for talking about the similarities first. That would be like much more easier for me, as like based on my experience so far. So I worked for about 2 years full time, along with mainly Europeans and American colleagues in Europe and in the Middle East. And then I've been working with basically all Chinese for almost a year now, back in Hong Kong in the humanitarian or development sector. So I can feel this strongly all the time, which is why we joined the humanitarian sector, because we all want to work towards the same goal, the common goal, which is to serve the vulnerable populations in different parts of the world. So I think this mindset is the same for all the humanitarian or development workers in any of the regions I work in. So to share a bit more like what I'm currently doing, I'm managing several Hong Kong Red Cross Fund school-based disaster risk reduction projects in Sichuan, China. So similar to my previous job as an assessment officer working in the Syria response. So my current job at Hong Kong Red Cross also intends to bring knowledge and expertise from the international level to our project sites in China. And we always cooperate with local actors to try to figure out the best possible way, the most ideal way to serve the local populations. So for instance, we would apply international framework, which and then we try our best to transform its content into a program models that could be actually executed in a China context. So I think having such localization is very important in the sector. And on the other hand, regarding the differences, so from what I experienced, perhaps because of the humanitarian context I work in back in the Middle East is quite different from what I'm working right now. Which the previous one, it was more about emergency response to a protracted crisis, whereas the one I'm working on for the moment is more on the development side, which has the focus of building community resilience. So I'm indeed experiencing very different work modality, I would say. So in my current organization, we have a very hierarchical structure with multiple levels, multiple layers, whereas in my previous organization, we had a relatively flat structure. So I think having such a hierarchical structure more in the pyramid shape is still regarded as quite normal here in Hong Kong as one of the very Asian city. And also because of the fact that my current NGO is one of the biggest NGO in the city. So yeah, when it's become bigger, so everyone would know it. Somehow it will become more bureaucratic in some sense. And then, but I believe cultural factors played really a huge role in it. So at this point, I actually recall the time when I was struggling whether I should look for a job in Hong Kong or not. I remember I did think about, oh, maybe it's not a bad idea to come back to Hong Kong to work full time, as I could learn how to work more efficiently. Like as I think Amado said, where since you're here in China, you learn how to adopt, and then you realize people here, they work they're so hardworking. So that was my expectation. People work so fast, so efficiently. So that's what I could learn, and it's not a bad thing for me. But actually, in the humanitarian, in the NGO sector in Hong Kong, the reality is we focus more on the processes. So we spend so much time on, if you know the term 关系 in Chinese, or known as building good relationships in English. So we spend so much time in doing that. But I will not deny that this is very important to work on a development project, as you have to engage your beneficiaries, your project stakeholder well in order to make it a success. But sometimes maybe you will be discouraged by it. People are less focused on results, but we focus more on the processes to make it, I would say, happy for everyone. So yeah, I would say this kind of work modality could be quite challenging sometimes, but yeah, that's a very important issue to keep in mind. And lastly, I can also add that I have also become highly aware of how strong governments could limit the workspace of NGO in the humanitarian or development sphere in the region. Perhaps because I speak the local language, I can comprehend the situation better. So, but yeah, all these make my experience as a humanitarian very different. I think, yeah, that's all for now.
Thank you so much for your cultural perspective. Thank you so much. Monica, the question I would have for you is, what are the main entry points for a career in the research sector with the regional focus on East Asia?
Thanks so much, Aline. So currently, I'm working as a development coordinator at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center. So I can't speak as a researcher per se, but I can definitely speak on what I see around me working in think tanks in the US. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned after graduating from the Graduate Institute is that there really is no linear path. There's no blueprint to getting a certain position. So at the Carnegie Endowment, we are, I think, one of the biggest think tanks in the US. We do have quite a big name and reputation. A lot of the fellows and scholars, which I think many people are interested in doing, they actually join us later in their career. So many of them are people who've worked many years, sometimes in senior positions in government. They worked for INGOs like the UN or the World Bank, or they're currently professors as well for universities like Tsinghua. I think this is starting to change for us in some ways because we are in the Asia region trying to hire more younger scholars who can bring new perspectives on emerging issues, for example, like tech and cybersecurity. But we also have junior level positions. So for example, research assistants positions, research analyst positions. And for these, how people gain their entry points is pretty varied. So for example, at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center, we currently have 2 research assistants, one who joined us actually as an intern. He was interning for us when the position opened, and our director felt that he was doing a really great job and decided to offer him the position. Our other research assistant, Sam, who's also fantastic, he was actually working as a journalist for a small town newspaper in Sri Lanka. He joined us actually as an editor for I think a year or 2 before recently deciding he wanted to try more research and kind of adopting this new position after being with us for a bit. And then before them, we also have fantastic research analyst, Lucas, and he actually joined us after working for Goldman Sachs for 2 years in China. So as you can see, it's very, very varied. Before this, when I was in DC, I was working at a smaller defense intelligence think tank. And there, it was a much smaller think tank. So actually a lot of the researchers were much younger, people earlier in their careers. And I was very surprised to find actually that a lot of them did not necessarily have a master's or PhD, focused specifically on the research, on the region that they were looking at. Our research director there, for example, she actually was a STEM major who interned with us, with the organization, and just moved up very quickly because she just found such a knack for what she was doing. So I think, the overall lesson really is that it does honestly take a bit of luck. be in the right place at the right time. But I think what's really important is to really put yourself out there for those opportunities, to network, and then to kind of find the places that you're interested in working with and try to make those connections like that. So that's really, I think, the best advice I can give, because I really do think that I always like to tell people who are starting out to like not stress too much about some sort of linear path, because I think if you work hard enough, if you're good at what you do, like you'll find a way for sure.
Thank you, Monica. And at the Career Services, we agree with that, and this is what we're trying to spread to the students, that there's no such a thing as a career path when you start. I mean,
Yeah.
any
And
opportunity you can gain from any opportunity.
And I would definitely add, from my perspective, a really important thing is to try out different positions and see what you're good at. You know, for me, I'm doing development right now, and that was actually not what I started doing on my last job. It was something I had no idea what it actually was actually when I was working at the organization NGO I was working at before. But I actually really loved the idea of, you know, putting together these proposals for my policy recommendations and then making a project happen. And that's how I made the transition. So I definitely think after graduation, trying your hand at different types of jobs is a really good thing to do to find your niche.
Yeah, I agree. And I even recommend them to do so during their studies when they're looking for internship, to try things out.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Tiara, I have one question for you now. In your opinion, being a regional organization, how does the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat differ from other international organizations? How the specific regional scope of the organization reflected in its approach to the issues it has to deal with?
Thank you very much for your question. The Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat, TCS, was funded by the government of China, Japan, and South Korea. Each government pays 1/3 of our total budget, which means you don't need to worry about money. You don't need to do all those fundraising activities. If you are good at spending money, I think you're a good fit for this organization. But there's always a but. There's a glass ceiling. As a program officer, all the management level, including the director level and the board member level, they are all sent directly by the government. So as the program officer, no matter how experienced you are, no matter how many years you work for this organization, you would always be a program officer. I think that this does make us different from other organizations. As you know, the bilateral relationships among these three countries always has been ups and downs. So every project that we do, every issue that we approach, we try to put aside the bilateral relationships and focus on trilateral issues with the agreement from the three sides. So overall, I think TCS is a good place for young people to start a career in international organizations. Actually, our HR is going to attend the roundtable on October 14. So if you're interested in working for TCS, check it out. And in the past 5 years, TCS has hired 5 people from graduate introduced. As we have only 25 people in the office, it's 1/5 of our office population. So it's just a very high chance you get hired by this organization. Thank you.
This is amazing news. Thank you so much. And thank you for the publicity for Thursday. Thank you, Tiara. Amado. What we were wondering is, what is the life of entrepreneurs in today's China like? And what kind of support can you have access to?
This is a very interesting question because since, what can I say, 5 years ago, probably, the Chinese government, central government at the central level and national level, province and city level, and even district level, they had a lot of policies to support entrepreneurs to create their own businesses. Different reasons. From the macro perspective, to try to, there is even a program that we can study and I discuss in other conferences, the mass entrepreneurship program actually. And then, well, you have the macro policy of the Made in China 2025, artificial intelligence program investment, and so on and so forth. So many, there are many. I'm just discussing the ones that reach the highlights. But even, for example, in Shanghai, there is a district, Jiangpu district, that is designated for the central government as hub of innovation, but you have 10 different small clusters within the city in Shanghai that they have preferential policies to set up your company, depending on the type of company that you want to create, and so on and so forth. And this has changed over the past. I mean, as I told you, I arrived in 2008. So before, to set up a company as a foreigner, it was very difficult. You need to put a lot of money up front in the bank and register as a capital, as a collateral. But since the past 5 years, that a lot of restrictions went easier. And right now you don't need to put a lot of capital if you're a small entrepreneur, or if you are a multinational company. There are a lot of preferential policies as well to set up your operations in different high innovation tech parks and free trade zones and so on and so forth. So, but that was prior COVID. After COVID in 2020 was a very interesting period because the government also support companies, and this is not only me, many people that are experts analyzing China and other businesses, chambers of commerce, and so on and so forth, agree that most of the policies that the Chinese government, again, central, provincial, city, district level, support companies to try to restructure their debt, or also ease the tax contributions, grace periods to pay their debts, and so on and so forth. So the priority was to support the companies and entrepreneurs not to default, because obviously if you default, then you create a mass problem in terms of unemployment and liquidity, cash, and so on and so forth. So that was also a lot of support on the government last year. This year, it changed as well, because it's supposed that the economy has recovered a little bit, and this is true, but not all the sectors have recovered, and they haven't recovered at the same pace. So still, at the moment, you don't have a lot of, for example, credit available to look for investment. Before, 3 years ago, was relatively easy to get investment to set up, launch your startup from the private sector, different investment funds, or also from the government as well. You have access to certain funds that allow you to launch your company, but at this moment, most of them, they collapse, no? So they stop lending money because of different reasons, not only the COVID situation, but also many projects were not sustainable. And with this creation of a lot of companies and a lot of ideas. Well, not all the ideas and not all the companies have a sustainable business model. And at the end of the day, you need to get your return of investment, no? So the COVID situation just accelerate that process to make companies fail massively, many, small and medium and the big ones. But at the end of the day, right now, we are in a restructuring situation in different sectors. And most of the companies, let's say, that survive at the moment, they are the ones that either they had little or no debt. Second, they had a sustainable business model that they make their linear, and they also provide a solution, or there is a demand for that service or product that they have, right? And other companies, they have restructure, and they have also create niche markets where they can be specialized, from consumer goods to healthcare or to AI or other advanced technologies. But at the end of the day, I will say that the business environment is it got a reset button. Resources are not as abundant as they used to be in terms of finance and in terms of access to capital, but you still have the internal market. Now, there are many questions here because many people said, well, China is the biggest market in the world. And yes, but there is also a lot of competition, and it's not that easy. Now, with the e-commerce getting boom in China, well, the e-commerce is a big word. You have tens or hundreds of different networks where you can sell your product, but that's also is not cheap. Right now, getting an e-shop on Taobao or Tmall is quite expensive, or even more expensive to maintain than having a retail store. And that is not what I'm saying myself. It's entrepreneurs, they say themselves, even small and medium companies, they said, well, if I have my store on Tmall, on Taobao, I'm paying a lot of money and I'm not getting anything because I depend basically on an algorithm that put my products and ratings and so on and so forth. Whereas in the physical store, if I'm in a good location, well, there is traffic and I can sell. I'm talking about someone that sells specialty coffee in China, no? And like this, you have different examples. So I will say that there is, I'm not saying it's impossible, but right now is what I also try to communicate with different entrepreneurs, is that the most important part is that your business, it's a business, that it doesn't depend on investment. And I'm saying, using always a metaphor, like when you're a student and you have access to grants. I had a lot of grants when I was a student. I almost never pay for my education. I receive money, but I never generate money. So it's the same as an entrepreneur. When you have investment, it's great. But if you don't sell anything, well, this is your business. You have to, in a business, you buy and you sell. And you have to have a profit. If you don't have a profit, forget about all these buzzwords that customer acquisition of customers, or what is your EBITDA or return of investment, and so on and so forth. If you, out of €1 or 1 Swiss franc, if you don't get 10%, 15%, 20% margin, then it's not a business.
Okay.
Plain and simple. So yeah, so I will leave that for now, and then we can expand a little bit further.
Thank you so much for sharing that knowledge. Now, I'm conscious of the time. So, Yinking. A lot of East Asian major cities are heavily reliant on the financial and commercial sectors, as you said earlier, and do not seem to have a strong tradition for humanitarian and development work. What would you say are the major opportunities out there for development and humanitarian practitioners? And are there any major domains that practitioners focus on?
Thanks, Aline, again. So I would admit that it had been really the situation, at least in Hong Kong, for quite some time. That the people here focus on their material living standards. And when you approach them and say that, oh, let's promote humanitarianism and work on developments together, they will think that you're basically a dreamer. So you're unrealistic. So yeah, even my friends like said something like this to me before. So I was very discouraged at that time. And then saying a bit more something bad about my people here in Hong Kong. So I would say people here did have a very short attention span when it comes to any international events. So, but I would say the most important thing that I have observed is we all care about those strategies. And I could tell everyone here since my return to Hong Kong last year, things here change rapidly because of the political dynamics here in the city. So I can say that like people nowadays, they pay like a longer span of attention, and they care so much about local and international news constantly, thanks to the boom of like different sorts of social media platforms as well. So now I believe like they can all hold a discussion with any one of us here about the alarming humanitarian situation, be it in Afghanistan or in Haiti. And therefore, I think with such like increased political awareness and there's good sense of empathy in the city right now. So they are the opportunities for humanitarian and development practitioners. So for example, I know a former humanitarian who worked for ICRC before. He returned to Hong Kong to join a local, relatively grassroots NGOs to promote social cohesion. And also, I have friends returned to Macau who was a former UN intern at the Secretariat refugee camp in Jordan. So she returned to Macau last year to create a local knowledge and advocacy platform to promote sustainable development. So I would say opportunities always exist in East Asian major cities. Whether you are aspiring humanitarian / development practitioners, or actually is a current one in this sector. So I think we should all understand that humanitarian or development needs exist in all kinds of settings. So they just appear in different forms, and they're waiting for us to explore them and to address them. So I would say lastly, so as a short promotion, so I would invite everyone here do come and try work in East Asia. So I would say in the humanitarian development sector, in all sorts of contexts, it's always challenging. But we are here to explore the opportunities, to find out the space we can work in to help the people who are really in need in those places. So if you're willing to embrace the challenges, so please come to East Asia, even to Hong Kong.
Thank you so much, Yingqing. I'm sure you'll have a lot of candidates. Who I'm very conscious of the time. We have only 11 minutes left. Let me ask quickly this question to Monica. Can you compare your experiences working in an NGO and in the research sector? Are there any difference of work style?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for that, I would say it really, really depends. Every organization is different. From my experience, the think tanks I worked at, a really central part of what they do is producing the research analysis on current developments, policy recommendations, and then getting that into the hands of government officials, policymakers to influence policy. At CEIP, we also do a lot of events too, where we're bringing together, scholars, government officials, former government officials to try to produce recommendations as well. But for my last organization, just as a little background, I was working for a NGO in DC focused on the Syrian conflict. So our main mission was to promote transitional justice efforts and criminal prosecutions in the Syrian context. And so working for an NGO like that, it was much more, I would say, mission focused. You know, we did also do a lot of research on these issues, but a lot of the program that we did was much more varied, with a focus on, you know, supporting our overall mission. So we were also, you know, working on collecting digital evidence in a database. We were supporting victims groups. We were even helping collect DNA evidence of mass graves inside Syria. And so a lot of the work that we did that I found really interesting was that we worked much closer with, I think, grassroots organizations in that context. So I would say, you know, one of the things I would always say to people is that I think it's really important when you're looking for a job to kind of look at the mission of an organization, to look at what their values are, what their programming is, and see if it aligns with your own values and what you want to do. For me, I think moving to DC and then looking for a job is actually really, really useful for me, because there's just like a whole culture with these organizations that you can't see from the outside, you know. So being in DC, I was able to learn not just like what the political orientations were of a lot of these think tanks, but also, you know, what is the work culture that they're known for, you know, what is the level of diversity they have, the ethics that they really value. And I think that was really, really helpful and important to me when I was searching for a job.
Okay, thank you so much. Very good to know. Tiara, do you have any suggestions for students who aspire to explore career opportunities in East Asia?
Yes, I have two suggestions. Number one, don't wait until you get a job to start doing what you enjoy doing. Like, for example, if you want to be a reporter, start writing a blog, start freelancing for other newspapers, start interning at a news organization. So when you finally get the job interview, you can show them to your future boss and say, hey, look at it. See how passionate I am in writing. And this is exactly how I got my first job. And suggestion number two, don't have a life. Please, don't have a life. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe if you really enjoy doing something, you want to do it all the time. So if you have a life in your 20s, which means you're probably doing the wrong thing. Yes, that's the two suggestions that I want to give. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiara. And last question from Ado. How did you overcome the language barrier? Is this really something to worry about in practice?
Yes and no. Well, obviously, when you are in the host country, you have to speak the language. No? Otherwise, you you will miss a lot. But there is one thing that was mentioned previously. I think our friend in Hong Kong mentioned it about Guangxi. That it's honestly is not that specific to China. I think, I'm sorry to say that, but I believe that in Mexico, and I live in France, in Switzerland, in the US, when you have relationship is key, and you have to be really a people's person. It's not, I mean, I love to be in the library all the time and reading. I love is one of my passions, but I also love to meet people. And meeting people can open a lot of doors. Just to give you an idea, coming back to the previous question that you told me, to set up my company here, I told you before that I think you have to put 1 million RMB in before to set up your own company. When I set up my company 5 years ago, I spent 1 franc, 1 Swiss franc. It was the the ride to the metro, to the subway from my house to sign the papers and come back. Everything was free because I have guanxi, and not the guanxi or the relationship that you need to bribe or the negative side. It was that, again, reading the policies, reading the support, everything is relatively clear, not only here, but everywhere. You just need to read and meet the right people to pursue your career or get your objective is crystal clear. You just need to do research, and this is what we learn in the institute, right? Research. So do the research in general. So that's the ability to do or to get basically, and meet people. And this is the first thing. The second thing, coming back to the language, of course, when I came in 2008, I had an online course in Coursera, and I took some lessons in the institute from another student. And now he's an investment banker, very successful here in China, in Shanghai, from the institute. And he gave me the first lessons in Chinese. He's Swiss. So then I came, I do a 6 months intensive training in Fudan University, 7 hours, 6 hours a day of Mandarin from zero. And again, I'm not telling you that I'm going to get a dissertation for my PhD in Mandarin and I know the classic Chinese and I'm an expert in Confucius literature. No, but you really need to get familiar with this, and most importantly, that the language is to understand the culture, like everywhere. And this is again another thing that we learn in the institute. Most of our panelists here, they were doing some job or research related to the Middle East, and it's exactly the same. You need to get familiar with the culture, the mindset, and for a non-Asian here, not many people take into account that, but yeah, it's a language barrier, it's a cultural barrier, but at the end of the day, you need to do your research and you need to combine, of course, the big picture with the daily life and just get your own impressions. One of the things that I face myself here all the time when we enter into a contentious negotiation at the end of the day is one of the phrases that I hear the most is, "Oh, but you're not Chinese. You don't understand how it works." I said, "Yeah, maybe, yeah, that's true. But I'm Mexican and I don't even understand the Mexicans. I don't even understand why they behave like that. You know, I'm not an expert in Mexican culture only because I'm Mexican. I know everything about Mexico. That's not true. But what I know from my sector or from the industry or from this deal is this. So let's stop with the cultural thing and just focus on what matters. And of course, we respect the codes, we respect the hidden codes and the culture and the subtitles, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's just to try to encourage people not to get discouraged because he says, "Oh, it's so different."
Okay.
At the end of the day, I'm sorry to say, but it's not that different. It's a country or a region like the others. You just need to adapt.
Thank you so much for the kind reminder. Sometimes it's not common sense for everyone, so thank you so much. Over to you, Lucille. Thank you to all.
Thank you so much, Aline, and thank you to all the panelists for all your wonderful insights. This was very useful and interesting, at least for me, who is myself very interested in East Asia as well, but I'm sure for other students as well. Now I'm gonna move on to the Q&A. So we have one question for Monica from a student, which was, as a person who grew up in the US, do you feel the cultural difference in China and how do you get used to it?
Yes, I would say absolutely. I think that being Asian American, you know, is a very different culture from someone who grew up in China. I actually spent some of my childhood in China, so I think, you know, it is a bit different for me. I, you know, it's difficult for me to say, to be honest, right now, because like I said, I started this position last year and I've been working remotely since, and I haven't been able to really return to China in a professional setting. But I think I've already learned a lot about just the intricacies of how you deal in a professional setting with people in China has been definitely a lesson that I've been trying to learn much better, the levels of respect, how you address others. And so I think it's really important for people in situations like myself, where we do have this affinity and this connection to China, to also realize that, you know, just because I am Chinese American does not make me somehow an expert in Chinese culture, somehow like like that I can just go into a position like this and feel that I can act from my own personal experiences. I hope that was helpful. That's the most I can say at this point. I can probably speak more, hopefully, in a year or two when I spend some time working in Beijing.
Thank you so much, Monica. Just to inform you, we're going a bit over time, but if the panelists are okay, we can still ask the 3 questions left. And for the people who have to leave, there will be the recording, which you can check the answers. So now there's a question for Tiara. So how did you convince yourself when you are where you are is always the right place? And I also want to work in Korea. So how is it possible to work in Korea without speaking Korean?
How did I convince myself I'm always in the right place? There's a psychological trick. Every day you write it down. I'm in the right place for 15 times. After like 3 months or half a year, you believe you're in the right place. This ideas come from the book called Useful Delusion. Again, it's a psychological trick. Like, for example, my parents, they married for 40 years. My father believed he married the right woman. Everything my mother says, everything my mother does, he thinks she's right. That makes the decision making in our families very easy and smooth. That doesn't make my father a very successful person, but it makes him a very happy married husband. Again, that's how powerful useful delusion is. That's why I'm using this delusion applied to myself, believing that I'm in the right place. It makes me happier in career and makes my life very interesting every day. How to find a job in South Korea? I think I want to say because I'm really smart, but I guess it's because I'm lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time. Again, like everyone mentioned in the discussion, in Asia, it's all about connection. It really depends who you know. So if you don't have connections, start making connections, start getting to know people in a field, and one can connect you to the other people, and eventually you'll be there. And good luck.
Thank you very much, Tara. Actually, there's another question for you, which was, how's the feeling of 5 institute students in the same organization? Do you help and support each other?
I should give the official answer. Yes. It's a teamwork, right? We're the team. You do all the work. I think it's it makes me question why the organization hired me. Is it because how awesome I am, or because I graduated from the Graduate Institute? Because they keep hiring the people from Graduate Institute. I don't stand out, but I'm grateful that to have this Geneva background, and then when people see me graduate from Graduate Institute, they automatically have this biased perception of how awesome I am. I think everyone sees everything and everyone in a biased way, and I am privileged to have this biased perception of who I am. Yes. And I have to say, among 5 of us, 3 have left and move up to another journey of their life. So I think there's a possibility that we might hire more people from Geneva.
Thanks, that's very good to know. I'll just ask one last question for Amado, and then for the other questions, well, we won't have time for them, but maybe if the panelists want to share their email addresses and you can ask questions, or you can ask them through the alumni office, and I will forward them to the panelists for the questions that we haven't had time to cover. So the last question will be for Amado, but I think we have sort of covered it. So the question is, the regional relations between East Asia and Latin America have been more than I thought, regardless of ideological, philosophical, and socioeconomic diversity. How do you manage the differences to work more efficiently between cultures, ways of doing things, and in other aspects?
Sometimes, and it's a very interesting question that I'm going to just try to put it on the ground. When people tell me, yeah, that, oh, it's because Chinese culture has thousands of years, and Mexican culture also thousands of years. Yes, but bottom line, I was born in 1982. I don't have all the 5,000 years of background of my culture, and neither do you. So let's discuss what's real, let's understand each other, and let's go to a common understanding of what do we want. One of the things that I learned over the years, and that's what I really like, I like what our friend in Seoul said about being passionate. What I'm passionate about is negotiating, and I love it. I really, really love it. And China is the best place to be for that, because everything is a negotiation. You negotiate everything, every day, every day, every day. And everybody wants free stuff, right? And sometimes you lose a lot, but sometimes you win, and you win big. So you need to choose your battles. And at the end of the day, I think is when you are within cultures, there is a lot of theories about that. Similar cultures probably are more alike to be aligned, but in reality they get more dispute and so on and so forth. But at the end, it's more on a people's to people's approach, and this approach is to get to know what is the pain point, and who is the decision maker, and who are the people that might help you to get to that decision. And it comes again, not necessarily to see the situation as clash of cultures, or this is extremely abstract and very, very complex, that the person that you think that the other person understands it, but in reality, most of the time they don't, because they don't know the culture. And I come to many meetings that we have to deal with some issues related to Mexico or Latin America, and the person in front of me, they don't even know where is Mexico. So there is no point to try to go on the conversation to the cultural approach. Is more on either on the business side, or the intentions and the decision-making process. And this is what, well, when I was studying, I love, and I still learning a lot about the game theory and a lot of negotiation skills and things like that. Not only on the mathematical side, but also in the soft approach. But in reality, you just need to listen to the people, really, really, and try to see what they are asking for and what they want and what can you give and what you can't, and be honest about it. That's the main principle. Many people said, you repeat a lot that you're honest. That means that probably you're not honest. And I said, no, you need to really highlight this part, honest, and be transparent. Because of course you have here in China another very interesting approach about losing or saving face, right? And this is, again, not only in China, in Mexico, we have exactly a similar thing that you need to try to avoid conflict in public to get the results what you want and try to make the relationship as harmonious as possible in public. Probably in private, you hate each other, but not in public. No? So this is also a common principle that you see across cultures in different situations. So at the end of the day, it's just do your research, be nice, and try to be fair and honest and transparent as possible. That's the only thing.
Thank you very much, Amado. That was a very good answer. Thank you. I think we're gonna have to end now because it's already past 12 and we're really over time. But thank you so much for all the panelists for attending this session. We were very pleased to welcome you at the Institute again, even though it was virtually, hopefully one day in person again. And I hope all of you guys enjoyed this session, and I will upload the recording in the coming days. So if you want to rewatch it, or if you just join in the middle and want to see some parts, feel free. I will now just leave well, some of the panelists have shared their email addresses, so I guess you can contact them directly if you have questions, or you can contact us at the alumni office if you want to get in touch with other panelists. Yes. Thank you so much, and I'll leave the floor to Filippo or Alma to quickly close. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all of the panelists. Thank you, Aline. Thank you, Lucy, and thanks for all the participants. I will just say a final word that we're probably going to send you a feedback form. So it would be nice if you could fill in the feedback for us to know whether or not the session has been helpful. And again, if you are interested in knowing more about the Geneva Forum on East Asia, please check out the program, and hope to see you again in some other sessions. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'll just end the meeting now. Thank you, Aline. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.